Hello, and welcome to this week's Billing and Reimbursement live chat, all about claim forms. Now, that seems to be a pretty stagnant topic for an exciting PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to do what I can, okay? All right, the first thing that you need to understand is there are at least two different claim forms. This is the outpatient claim form. This is a copy of the paper claim form, also known as the CMS 1500, which has been used for years and years and updated over the course of time. And the electronic version looks a bit differently, but the data, the information that you need to input is the same. There are fields that are identified with a little caption like patient's name, last name, first name, middle initial. This is what is focused upon in your textbook chapter reading for this week. It is important that you pay attention very carefully as you are inputting this data for the first time. Now, this is an absolute wonderful thing about doing this using a computer software program, because you only have to put the patient's name in once. You only have to put their policy number in once. You put it in correctly once, it will be correct on 10,000 claims and other documents moving forward. However, you make one mistake and it will be 10,000 errors. Okay? Now, remember that a computer at the third-party payer, because all claims are submitted electronically unless the provider has a waiver. But remember that it goes from your computer at work to the computer for the third-party payer. And the computer is very specific. It's either right or it's wrong. So if you misspell the patient's last name, for example, okay, the last name is Colson, Colson, and it is mistakenly put in as Colsen, every document with that spelling will come back rejected, because the computer at the third-party payer will say that policy number does not belong to someone whose last name is Colsen. There is no, and you might look at this as a downside, that there is no human there to say, oh, well, everything else matches exactly. It was just a little human typo. It's okay. We'll let it go through. Computers don't do that. Computers say it's either correct or it's incorrect. And if anything is incorrect, rejected. So then what happens? Then it depends on the facility. Some facilities will have the coders correct, or the billers correct the form and file a CC, a corrected claim, and everybody can be happy. However, you should know that there are providers who will just accept that rejection or denial and just send the invoice to the patients because they don't have time to mess with this. Okay, even though 85% of the time it was their mistake to begin with. I don't know. I do not approve of that. So therefore, I am going to remind you. You need to slow down. You need to pay attention to every letter and every number, and you need to double check everything before you hit that submit button, because people will be harmed. People can be thrown into bankruptcy. Their lives can be made a nightmare, all because the coder and biller did not pay attention. And if you think I'm being dramatic, no, unfortunately, I'm not being dramatic. I'm being honest. I'm being truthful. I am telling you, this is part of the responsibility of this job. If you don't want to dot every I and cross every T, there are other jobs that you could have. But just think about when you're the patient. Just think about when the patient is somebody who you love and care for. And you're the one who all of a sudden receives a bill for $150,000. I'm sorry, the insurance company rejected this claim. The insurance company denied this claim. It's got to be investigated. But let's start out with the people who are doing this in the first place. And that's you. But that's why you're here in school. So you get an automatic thumbs up, because you're here to learn how to do it the right way. And that is incredibly important. And it's just not about only you. Okay. All right. So the outpatient claim form, which is different than the inpatient claim form, which I'm going to show to you in a minute. But I also want you to remember that everything is done in the computer. Okay. So this is the inpatient claim form, the paper version, known as the UBO4 or the CMS 1450. Okay, well, but the fact is that those are the paper designators, okay? But I just wanted you to have a sense of the difference between a claim form that you may create and submit when you're working at a hospital versus that of working for a physician or a clinic or something like that, okay? So you can see that there are a lot more available lines here for diagnoses as well as procedures. And this is all, again, very specific, okay? Very, very specific from you, because you are entering this information, you are double checking this information, okay? All right, is that enough now? All right, just carry that forward. So electronic claims processing is what we have been doing for at least five years, at least 5 years. Okay. The law states that every healthcare facility must submit an electronic claim. Now that's from CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So you know that's going to cover your claims to Medicare, Medicaid, and TRICARE, military. Okay. However, all of the private health insurers are also on board with this because it saves them a tremendous amount of money. Okay. So again, you are going to electronically create this claim form using what is known as medical practice management system. Practice management system. We used to use the initials, but if you notice, the initials are PMS, and really nobody feels comfortable with that. Okay. All right. So it's all done in the computer, and this software, this software is going to collect the appropriate information from the registration form, from the coding, from the documentation, whatever is in there that is necessary for the claim form. And so this is what, remember, we were just talking about the CMS 1500, which is what is represented in your chapter. The electronic designation is 837. That's the name, the number of the form. Okay. And then you have P for professional when you are submitting it for a physician. And then you have an I for institutional for a hospital. And it depends, but for the most part, like a skilled nursing facility, maybe a long-term care facility, may use the institutional form as well. That's going to depend on the individual third-party payer. So it is important that you check with your third-party payer at least once a year, because they're not going to change it more often than that. And just make sure that you have updated software that is going to enable you to complete and submit the correct claim form. Okay, so P for professional, P for physician, and then I for institutional, as in hospital. I know hospital doesn't begin with an I, but it does have an I in it. Does that count? Okay, so you can memorize that part. All right, so I also wanted to introduce you to the names of some of the most commonly used patient management software programs that are out there. And Epic, I know, and from what I know from my compatriots and colleagues in the industry, Epic is very well known and used in a great number of places. However, do not take that for granted. I also want you to be prepared should you go get a job at a small physician's office or a small clinic with maybe one physician or two physicians. They may still be a little behind the times, and I am depending upon you to educate them and encourage them to check out and choose and implement patient management software, because I promise you it'll get them paid faster. It's more accurate. It's just so logical. Okay. I'm sorry to say, but technology wins over paper. Okay. All right. So these are just a few of the most common patient management software systems. The bottom line is they relatively work the same because they're all going to be pulling information from the registration and from encounter notes that are going to automatically forward this into the claim. So you are not retyping the patient's policy number every time the patient comes in and you have to submit a claim. You're not retyping their name, address, and phone number. However, number one is make sure you double check at least the first time. And number two, whenever you get a rejected claim or a denied claim, the first thing you should do, the first thing you must do is go back into the system and look for typos. Correct them and move forward. Okay? How easy is that? Super duper easy. Okay? So it is important that it's important that you be prepared to be proactive. And I know once you graduate, you're going to go out there and it's scary, and you're going to have second thoughts, and you're going to consider, I don't know everything, and you should always feel that way. You should always double check. Double check. But that does not mean you don't have anything to bring to the table. Because that's the great thing about education and doing what you're doing, going to school, is you learn new things. You learn more up-to-date things that maybe have not reached into your practice yet. And you then get to share the knowledge. And that is very exciting. That is really very exciting. Okay, so a few other terms that you should be familiar with regard to electronic billing is the system uses what's known as EDI, which stands for Electronic Data Interchange. And this is already, and this is another thing that you need to check if you're getting new software, is that it's HIPAA compliant, okay? It's got to be HIPAA compliant, but that the electronic data interchange that's used for the submission of claims is also going to be used for the return of the remittance advice, and of course the money is going to go electronically into the facility's bank account. So it's got to be encrypted to make sure that it's protected. The Administrative Simplification Compliance Act requires that claims be sent to Medicare electronically as a condition for payment. And that has then trickled down into Medicaid. It has trickled, as I said before, to the private payers, Aetna, United, Humana, everybody, because it saves them money and it's much more accurate. Okay. And now we have AI, automated intelligence, coming into the picture. It's important that you do what you need to do to maintain the human part. And remember that, wait a second. I wanted to use a example, okay? All this software, AI, EDI, all of this are tools for you to use to make it easier for you to do a job of excellence. That's all they are. There are people out there, it reminds me of Chicken Little. The sky is falling, the sky is falling is like, oh, technology is going to take away the jobs. Technology is going to take away the jobs. First of all, technology is being used because there aren't enough qualified humans to take the jobs, so they have no choice. It's important to you to collect and acquire this knowledge that we are sharing with you so that you have it to use on the job and you have it to share. So if you get somewhere and they're not doing things the way you were taught, you need to speak up and say, did you know that the ASCA requires electronic claims unless you have requested a waiver? But the fact is you get paid faster with electronic claims. When electronic claims first came into being about 10 years ago, the facts were that physicians, it could take them up to 4 to 6 months to get paid from CMS, from Medicare. It was one of the reasons why they hated working with Medicare, was because, but the private payers weren't that much faster, maybe 3 to 4 months. 3 to 4 months, okay? After you do your job, 3 to 4 months to wait to get paid, 4 to 6 months. Once they instituted electronic submission of claims, that 4 to 6 months became, I swear, 4 to 6 days. So now you're getting your money within a week after submitting the claim form. And so what does that mean? That means that the facility has their own money to use to meet payroll, to buy a new x-ray machine, whatever it might be, okay? Instead of having to go borrow the money to fulfill the need and wait to get the money back, because no matter what, you're still paying interest, it still costs. Whenever a facility can use its own money to pay its own bills, that is efficient and effective. And that's the number one thing that electronic submission does for, especially for the little 1 and 2 physician offices. That means a lot to their bottom line. Okay. Also keep track of how much you're saving them, because that will come in very handy during your next raise conversation. Okay. All right. The payments and documentation. So you probably know already, and I think we actually discussed it here, is you know what the explanation of benefits. The EOB is sent to the patient, the beneficiary, from the insurance company saying, your doctor or the hospital sent us this claim. This is what they asked for. This is what we paid them. Maybe you owe $10. Maybe you owe nothing. It's all covered. Okay. We like those. Okay. Well, the provider who submitted the claim gets a similar documentation, but instead of an explanation of benefits, it's called the electronic remit or remittance advice, ERA. Okay. So the difference is going to be, of course, because the providers have multiple patients. So you submit like 5 claim forms to the same insurance company for 5 different patients. Then they're going to send you one remittance advice back that's going to have each of the 5 payments and explain, here's what you claimed, here's what you asked for, here's what we paid, here's why we didn't pay it, here's why we paid less, whatever. Very, 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 very important. When you get an ERA, when you get that remittance advice back, you need to check the tiny little letters at the bottom. You need to find out why something was not paid in full or why something was not paid for at all, because it may require you to fix something and resubmit or send in an appeal to say, you know, the patient, this is medically necessary, whatever. Okay. Now, we have to also remember that the third-party payers have humans working there as well. To err is human. To correct and resubmit is divine. Okay? So they may reject or not pay something by accident, which is why your follow-up for these claims that you create and submit is as important as creating the claims in the first place, because there may be a rejection or a rejection or a denial and you didn't do anything wrong. It was their mistake. We tend to forget that as well, that they make mistakes also. Okay. So the fact is that in order to do our jobs correctly, not only do we need to interpret the documentation into the appropriate codes, we need to check and make sure that the diagnosis codes support medical necessity for the procedure codes that we're going to put on this claim form. We have to also make sure that we check eligibility and verification. Remember, we talked about that also. In which case, If eligibility and verification is confirmed and your codes are accurate and supported by the physician documentation, that claim form should go and come back with ka-ching, with money in the bank. Anything less, and it's your responsibility to follow up. Anything more, and it's your responsibility to follow up. Because if you think if they gave you an extra $100 and you go, oh boy, isn't that wonderful? Look what I got. It's not like winning a door prize, because I can promise you that they will come in 2 years for that $100. But in that case, you're going to have to pay back the $100. Well, not you personally, but the $100 will have to be paid back in addition to fines and penalties. And the penalties start at triple. So in other words, the first thing I could tell you is the $100 needs to be paid back. Then there's going to be $300 in penalties. And that's just the beginning. Okay. This is money. Nobody messes with the money. But while it's glorious to know that we, those in the health information management department, and particularly medical coding and billing, we have a grave responsibility because it is our hand on that tap. And if we turn the tap the wrong way, the facility does not get the money it deserves. If we turn tap the other way, we may get more than we deserve, which you know is not right. So you got to make sure. You got to double check. You have to be exacting. I's dotted, T's crossed. It's a good thing. All right. So whether you're going to work in a hospital or a doctor's office, whether you're using the 837P for professional or the 837I for institutional, the fact is that you are going to be getting experience with patient management software, and you need to make certain that you're paying attention to details. Okay? All right. This is my email address, safiansc@cctech.edu. The email address under class list is not accurate and will send your message to the third ring of Saturn. I will never see it. So if you don't mind, please send it to me so I can respond to you within 24 hours. I promise. And then we'll figure it all out together. Okay? You betcha. I'm on your side. Uh-huh.